the surveys, I did have some stuff to say about them.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Dalton, and I'm the Executive Director of the Adams County Historical Society in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I'm here with Tim Smith, our historian at the Adams County Historical Society. Please let us know if you can hear okay in the comments. We always like to check before we get too far into the program. It's exciting to be with you again. We've been doing this once a month now. Of course, every week we have a program, but we've done at least one live video per month. And we're kind of going through chronologically the timeline of Adams County's history. So we started with a program on geology and prehistoric times. We did a program on Native Americans last month. And now we're going to talk about the first European settlers in Adams County. But before we get into that, I just want to point out that if you donate tonight, there is a match. We're raising money for our new building, which you can see just right here behind me on this poster. We broke ground for our new building about 2 weeks ago, and we're very excited. It's going to be built in 2 different phases. The first phase will start in the coming weeks here. So there's a $500 match. If you give, you'll be giving double because there'll be gifts directed out of that $500 directly toward our new home. And the Adams County Historical Society really needs a new home. Right now, we are located in an old Victorian building without any climate control or fire protection. And with over 1 million items, it's really a huge risk to the memory and the legacy of this community. And of course, Gettysburg is one of the most famous places in the world. So we have a pretty important mission here, and we really take that seriously. So thank you to all the folks who are watching and to all who have already donated. We have over 600 donors to our campaign already, which is amazing. And we've raised over 4 million. So we're getting there. We have a long way to go, but we're very excited, and we'll have a pretty big update in the next month about the museum in this new building. We've contracted with a company, and we're going to be making an announcement about that in the coming weeks. So it looks like everybody can hear, which is wonderful. I already introduced Tim. I also want to thank the Dobbin House, our sponsor for every program we give this year. I just want to set up a little bit. Tim's going to talk about the early settlers. We're not just talking about what it was like to arrive here. We're going to talk about some of the really serious issues that were faced by the early communities in Adams County, like how do you acquire title to a property? How do you become a landowner? How William Penn set up his government in Pennsylvania in colonial times. And we're going to talk about the disputes over land between Maryland and Pennsylvania authorities, between settlers and other families of settlers, between ethnic groups. And we're going to talk about a pretty famous murder that actually took place very early here in what is now Adams County. So let me let Tim give us a little bit of an introduction to what we're going to talk about tonight. And if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments. We'd appreciate hearing from you, and we'll do our best to answer. So go ahead,
okay.
Tim.
So tonight, again, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the topics that we're going to cover in our new museum. So what we've been doing is researching early history of Adams County for these galleries that were, and not everything that we talk about will be in the museum, but it's a sampling of the kinds of stuff that we have that we'd like to, highlight. And we're going to show a few artifacts that we have in a collection pertaining to this. So in 1681, Charles II of England granted William Penn, an English Quaker, a large piece of land in North America. Of course, it was named Pennsylvania, or Penn's Woods. The new colony was established based on Penn's principles of religious freedom, democracy, and peaceful relations with the indigenous people. Over the next several decades, thousands of Europeans flocked to Penn's holy experiment. By 1700, the colony's population exceeded 18,000 people. English, Germans, French, Scandinavians, Irish, and Scotch-Irish, along with many enslaved Africans. William Penn died in 1718. But following his death, the province continued to be administered by his wife, Hannah, and then later his sons, John, Richard, and Thomas. John died early on, but here is Richard and Thomas, and it's their names that appear on some of the earliest deeds that we have in our county. Now, Penn was always careful to make sure that he acquired a clear title to the lands that were being settled. And he was always willing to sit down with whatever group of Native Americans claimed title over the particular piece of land that he was getting ready to open up to settlement. And he would not allow an area to be opened up to settlement
Right.
until he had signed some kind of treaty. And this policy actually kept Pennsylvania free of a lot of the turmoil on the frontier with the Native Americans that other colonies, such as Massachusetts or Virginia and Maryland, experienced. It was not until 1736 that Penn signed a treaty to allow settlement west of the Susquehanna River. And that's when people started to migrate into this area in large numbers. Maryland, however, had no issue with allowing settlement into this area that early on they deemed as part of Maryland. John Hance Steelman is said to be the first permanent white settler west of the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. And he had a trading post established maybe like 1719 near present-day Zora in southeastern Adams County. And you might know that in the picture here, a monument was dedicated by the state of Pennsylvania and some prominent Adams Countyans to mark the spot near where he had his early trading post.
Right. And for non-locals, this is kind of near Ski Liberty and Fairfield. So we're talking like southwestern Adams County.
Yep. I think it's at the intersection of Crum Road and Topper
Yeah,
Road
and
and Steelman
locals.
Marker Road and Petcher Road.
Okay.
Okay. We do have a really nice early map of Pennsylvania. And this is the skull map. And I think, let's see if I have an exact date for this version of it. There's 1770, William Skull produced this map. And I think he made updates to it. And this is actually a 1775 version of his map of Pennsylvania, showing the area, which of course was then York County. And I think in some form or fashion, we're going to highlight this map in the museum. And I don't think a lot of people had paid much attention to this, but this is really the first extraordinary map that gives you a glimpse into the early history.
And you can see the South Mountain Range too is very prominent on this.
Let's go to the next one. I'll talk about some features. Yeah. So this is the Adams County portion of this map. And by the way, this map is available on the Library of Congress. And I just wanted to mention some of the features shown on the map. Up near the top, you might see that the South Mountain is called Trent's Mountain. And of course, up near the top is Trent's Gap, which basically today is Mount Holly, or Paper Town. And then just south of that, you might notice the Quaker Meeting House, which is the Manawan Quaker Meeting House, established in 1748. And that's not where it currently exists. That is near where Center Mills is. And that's where the Manawan Road, laid out in 1750s, sort of ended. Just to the right of that, there's a thing called church, and that's probably the Rock Chapel Methodist Church. And then to the right of that, you might notice right under where it says Huntington Township, Round Hill. So here is a 1770s map that shows Round Hill by name. And of course, Round Hill out on 234 and 94 still has that name. We have, of course, the Manawan Road I mentioned, laid out in 1750. If you look way to the left of the map, you'll see Witherspoon's Gap, named after Thomas Witherspoon, an early settler that had land just east of Cashtown that ran down towards the Ortana area. Now that's not Route 30 that runs out through the mountain there. That's Black's Gap Road, which of course comes across and is the Hilltown Road, and then of course the Goldenville Road, and then runs over to Swift Run Road. You might also notice to the right of that a little bit, the Presbyterian Meeting, which is of course a little down from it, is Lower Marsh Creek Presbyterian Church is shown, and that runs along the Marsh Creek Road, which is shown on this map running from near New Oxford through the area of Gettysburg. And then basically it's 116 to Fairfield, and then down through a place on this map called South Gap, or it's actually, it says Willoughby's Gap, which I really find it interesting. Sometimes it's referred to as Nicholson Gap and later Monterey Gap. Now, also you might notice the Monocacy Road, which is near the bottom of the map, and it starts near Hanover, and it runs across through Heidelberg Township, and then down through what is now Littlestown, and then that road is confirmed in 1740.
And that's the oldest road to pass through the county.
Yeah,
Right?
it's the oldest road to pass through the county officially, and it undoubtedly is on an earlier trail that led through this area to the Monocacy River. Right. Along that road, you might notice Nick Rylands is mentioned by name. He's a Konawaenga settler, and I believe he had a tavern at that location. Also, Kitzmiller's Mill is listed on the map between Littlestown and Hanover. And of course, that is the site of Martin Kitzmiller's Mill. And we'll talk about that, of course, later, because that's the site of the murder of Dudley Diggs. And then also I want to point out at the bottom, it says temporary line. There was an agreement between Maryland and Pennsylvania as early as 1739 as to where that line should be. It was surveyed in 1765, and we're going to talk about it, not made official to the 1770s, 1774. And you might notice that the town of Hanover, Pennsylvania, laid down 1763. And I don't know if I mentioned, but Abbottstown, I think, is also shown on that map as Berwick, the town of Berwick, or Abbottstown, found in 1763. Okay. And, you know, another early area of settlement is the Konawaenga Chapel, the Catholic Basilica. Catholic priests came into this area, moving north from Maryland in maybe the 17 teens. And they, according to their history, they were missionaries trying to bring Christianity into the area. And then, the church there, the earliest part of the basilica today dates from the 1780s. But a congregation of Irish Germans and Irish German Catholics settled around that area, the Konawaenga settlement. Of course, we have the Marsh Creek settlement. Here is a picture of William McLean's house, and this is an 1880s photograph. And this house is an early house. It was there in the 1750s at least. And here's an image of it before it was torn down, and it's set somewhere in present-day Ortana. Right? And we'll talk about that later. Now, there are, besides the fact that people are moving into the area and settling the area, there was an opportunity for people to purchase large portions of land and then subdivide them and resell the land. And we have a few of those in our area. Not only early on are Pennsylvanians starting to move out into this area, but of course, as you mentioned, Marylanders are moving northward into what they hope will be Maryland. And we have 3 areas in our county that were land grants given by the authorities in Maryland to Marylanders and then resold to early settlers. And it would be on the map, I just kind of put A, Carroll's Delight or Carroll's Tract, which is a rectangular piece of land, 5,000 acres between Fairfield and Ortana. And then we have B, which is Carrollsburg, half of it in current Frederick County, Maryland, half of it in Adams County. And then number C there is, of course, Diggs Choice that I love to talk about. And then the big rectangle in the middle is the Manor of Mask. And we're going to touch on each of those land areas in a few minutes.
Right, and note that Gettysburg is in the center of one of those, for those of you not.
Gettysburg is in the middle of the Manor of Mask.
Right.
So we have some artifacts with the early settlers we're planning on putting in our museum, but obviously it's such an early period, we don't have as many artifacts as we'd like. But this is one that Andrew is very fond of that undoubtedly will go into the museum. You want to talk about it?
Sure. So this is the first donation ever received by the Adams County Historical Society in the 1930s. And you can see it's labeled accession number 1. And we love that. It's the first of 10,000 plus groups of artifacts we've received and of millions of items that we have. And it is a 50 shilling note from, I think, 1770. Is that right? Or is it? You have the date?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right.
And so, of course, this is early currency, and you see these references to, shillings and other European currencies in our early deeds and tax records and all kinds of official documents. So this is an amazing example of that. And I love, I think the back says, "To counterfeit is death." That's my favorite part of that.
I should have put it on. And of course, its catalog number in our computer is 0001.001.
Yeah, so we won't get into the reason.
I love that. Okay. We also have a book in the McLean family collection, and apparently it's from early settlers by the name of Scott. And it's a book of devotions, and it was printed in Dublin, Ireland. And for those of you who cannot read Roman numerals, it's 1714. So again, there were no settlers in this area at that time. And we have a book owned by a family from 1714. We also have, this is a oath of allegiance that was signed by a German who was immigrating into Pennsylvania. So they had to renounce their allegiance to the king or the prince or the principality that they came from, and give their allegiance to the state of Pennsylvania, their new home. Now, I want to talk a little bit about acquiring property in the state of Pennsylvania at that time. So what would happen, basically, it's a 3-step process. People would move into the area, and they would pick a piece of land, and maybe they would build a log cabin on it. They were called squatters. A squatter could eventually obtain the land that he squatted on, or maybe he would move on and, as Andrew likes to say, squat somewhere else. So squatters would then apply for a warrant. They had to submit an application. A warrant was an official request for a survey of land, and you have to pay for the warrant. And you can ask for 50 acres, 100 acres, 200 acres, 300 acres. But if you ask for more land, the warrant costs more. And, the land around you might not be available if you ask for too large a piece of land. This warrant here is for Quentin Armstrong, I believe, and that's the Eisenhower farm. And off the top of my head, I can't read the date on it from here, but it's like the 1760s. Let's go to the next one.
1765. That's amazing.
So after you you applied for the warrant was granted, the land office would send an official notice to the deputy surveyor of your area. There was a Pennsylvania general surveyor, there were other surveyors, and there was deputy surveyors who would work certain regions. And this is a request, this document, that a survey be done. And this is for Richard Bard's land. And you can see it says that he's on Middle Creek, and that he wants this as part of the mountain land near his other land, which undoubtedly is Bard's Mill. So if we go to the next one, and you might know that during the French and Indian War, Bard's Mill was raided by French and Delaware soldiers, and that's where one of the kidnappings took place during the French and Indian War. And we talked about that in a program a couple months ago. Let's go to the next one. Here's another request for a survey that I put in here. Can you see what that one is?
Yeah, this one is Robert Letterman or something like that.
I don't remember why I put it in there.
Strabane Township.
Strabane, oh, no, this is David
1762.
Hunter at the top. This is David Hunter. This is for
yeah,
Hunterstown.
There you go.
And it's an early 1760 winner. It's the land right next to Hunterstown. Let's go to the next one. And this one is a really early one. I think I put in there if you see the date on it.
1746. Right?
1746. I was amazed when I started looking at the earliest documents in our collection, and almost all of them are related to early land in our area. And these documents undoubtedly were not ones that came from the York County government, because we're in Adams County. They came from the deputy surveyor's office, and that surveyor's office carried on from Lancaster into York into Adams County, and that's how we ended up with them.
I just want to get a question. Steve's asking, what happens if the warrant wasn't turned back in?
Cool. I think what happens is that someone else eventually applies for a warrant. I'm not sure if there's a period of time that goes by, but we have lots of cases where warrants are issued and the warrants are never acted upon. And let me suggest the reason they're not acted upon is because the person didn't actually pay the money that he was supposed to pay.
Or they didn't stay there. I mean, these are very transient people. In a lot of cases, they're moving around looking for the best possible place to settle. And so a lot of times the process was interrupted. I also want to thank, we've got lots of donations from Keith, Paula, Susan, Linda, Melissa. Thank you guys so much. That is so helpful. And we have like I said at the beginning, we've got a $500 match tonight. So it'd be great if we could access all of that for the new building.
So just to explain a little bit, we'll go to the next one, is that so the squatter would apply for a warrant. Let's say they paid their money and a surveyor was sent an order to survey the land. He came out, surveyed your land, and then you paid the surveyor. And then he sent the survey into the land office. They approved it, and I imagine they checked with all the other existing surveys in the area. They probably knew what land had been surveyed, and they knew the deputy surveyor had to know where the other people's property boundaries were. They approved it. They returned it to the surveyor. They gave the price of the land, and it was a set price per acre in Pennsylvania, unless it was already purchased and being resold by someone else. You paid the amount of money for the amount of acreage that you had asked for, and then eventually they issued you a patent deed, and you were the clear, you own clear title to the land. Now, years could pass between the time of the squatter and the time of the patent deed. In some cases in Adams County, 60 years goes by.
Right, and today PennDOT continues that tradition of.
So, do you know that what's really interesting is that a squatter would sell his land without owning title to it to another squatter, and that guy would get a warrant, and then someone with a warrant would sell the property to somebody else, and then a couple owners down the line, that guy would sell it to somebody who got a survey, and then that guy would sell it. And then eventually somebody got a patent deed. The land could be transferred and sold without having clear title, which really messes with us if we're trying to study a piece of land. What else? Which one was that? Okay.
Like we have another one here. This is 1762.
And I might be looking for the language. What's the language there?
Lancaster County. It is west of the Susquehanna River, adjoining the lands of Robert.
And at the bottom it says Konawaenga Creek.
Yes, it's 1742.
Some of these warrants are very vague. So in other words, okay, it's west of the Susquehanna River along the headwaters of Konawaenga Creek that this guy asked for a warrant. This one's kind of interesting.
Thomas Witherspoon.
Yeah, Thomas Witherspoon. And remember, I mentioned Thomas Witherspoon clearly owns a big piece of land just east of Cashtown, and it runs down towards Ortana. But look at the description of it. Andrew, can you read the description there?
Yeah, it says it's located on Marsh Creek in Cumberland Township in the county of York, adjoining the lands of John Buchanan, et cetera, et cetera.
And then at the very end, see what it says?
It says
it's near Hog Mountain.
Wow.
I love that. Hog Mountain,
Right.
which, you know, I'm going to
I've
take.
never heard that reference.
No.
That's interesting.
And also, it mentions in Cumberland Township, because Franklin Township wasn't formed at this time.
Right.
Some of the warrants are for Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
We've got a good question from our friend Tom. Is it safe to assume that all this unsettled land was completely forested and had to be cleared to be used?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's amazing to think about that too. You've got just a couple roads that have just kind of been cut in. They're in some cases previous, Native American paths that have been turned into roads, and people are just deciding to stop and clear a piece of woods. And you can imagine the fear of, the uncertainty and what was in those woods. Were there, especially during the French Indian War, were there bands of French and Native Americans about to raid, or, was there someone encroaching on their property and they, didn't know it? You can imagine the kind of lawlessness that existed.
And I'd imagine if you're a squatter, you don't own clear title to the land, or you don't have a warrant or a survey, you cleared the land, and that makes it valuable. Why would somebody buy your land if you don't have, because it's nice and clear and it's got a nice cabin on it.
Right. And we've got someone asking who Adams County is named after. That's President John Adams, who never set foot here, we believe, but was president in 1800 when the county was founded.
So this is Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, when it's first settled. And then in 1749, York County is founded, and we're the western townships of York County. And then in 1800, it becomes Adams County. So that's why on the various warrants, you might see Lancaster or York.
Here's somebody saying their ancestor actually ended up with more land than they applied for.
Yes.
Interesting. Can you have any reason for that?
That happens a lot. So let's say you ask for 100 acres of land in the warrant, but then let's say 30 years pass before they come out and survey the land. Meanwhile, people move near you. In some cases, the surveyor would say, I'm sorry, other people have boxed you in. You asked for 100 acres, or someone that you bought the warrant from asked for 100 acres, but only 51 acres is available. Occasionally, the surveyor would come back and say, hey, there's like 121 acres available here if you want it. And then the thing is, you got to pay more for it. Right. You're going to pay per acre. So if it's less, you pay less. If it's more, you pay more.
Right. Or the surveyors would say your land's actually in Maryland. We're going to talk about that a little bit.
And then hopefully the surveyor didn't make a mistake and draw your line over somebody else's line.
Yes, which we will talk about.
Okay.
A couple more documents. 1767, Moses McLean. That's nice.
Moses McLean. And again, this is for the house near Ortana.
Good. This is Hans Hamilton, 1767. Now,
this was kind of interesting. Hans Hamilton, and this is a piece of property, and it's called Hamilton's Choice. Oftentimes, the warrant or the request for the survey would give a name to the piece of property. Also, if you look at the top, there's a number, 1777. Now let's go to the survey. This is the survey, not 1777 the date.
2777 was the number.
Okay.
It's okay though.
Oh, geez. So here's the survey for the land. Now, the land is actually near the junction of Possum Creek and Konawaenga Creek. As a matter of fact, Bender's Church is in the middle of that track for my Bender's Church buddies that are probably listening. Let's go to the next one. And you can see one interesting thing, if you're good enough to figure it out, as Andrew mentioned, 2777 is the number on the request of survey, and on the survey it says 2777. So there is some method to their madness, and they were probably much better organized with their records then than we are now with their same records.
Imagine though the language barrier must have been a little difficult when you've got German immigrants and Irish immigrants and English surveyors coming out and trying to talk with them.
Yeah. So again, I just here's the whole survey. Go ahead. Also, in our collection, here are two examples that we have where these are receipts given to a landowner by the surveyor. And you asked about that. And both of them, I believe, if you look at it, Andrew, they tell you how much they charge. I think both of them are for like £2, 10 shillings is the top.
£2, 50 shillings, yeah. Right.
So there you actually have an amount for two different examples of how much it costs the surveyor to survey your land.
It is 10 shillings.
And you can bet you got to pay the surveyor or you ain't getting any patent. And of course, Here's George Washington as a young surveyor, and I put some copies of surveys in here to show because I wanted to just highlight a few. This is Jacob Shiley. I believe that's the area in Mount Joy Township, which is now the Outlet Mall. This is interesting. Here's James Geddes, and this doesn't have a date on it, but it is for the heirs of John Fleming. And that road running through the middle is undoubtedly the Baltimore Pike. And Gettysburg would be at the bottom, and it's where the Baltimore Pike crosses Rock Creek. That is McAllister's Mill. Here's an interesting land survey in Mount Joy Township. And at the very top, there's a creek running, which of course we recognize as Rock Creek, but it is a 1755 survey.
Wow.
And if we go to the next one, you can see it says, down the branches and courses of Rock Creek. That is the earliest known reference for the name Rock Creek. And I'm sure there's some other people out there that are just as excited as I am about that. Maybe not.
We got another question. Someone's asking if Native Americans ever tried to come back or participated in any way in the acquisition of land. And I don't think we know of any instances of that happening. That's a good question. I think by the time the Europeans had arrived here, due to disease and conflicts between different tribes and also just the threat of being too close to the line of settlement, Native Americans had mostly left the area. We don't know of any real interaction other than during the French and Indian War with these violent raids. There wasn't much of an interaction between the Native Americans that had lived here. And we did, as we pointed out in our program, last week, there were, Native Americans lived here for, close to 10,000 years prior to European settlement, but they weren't actually here at, the moment that these European settlers were arriving in this particular part of the state.
So this is, I see Thomas Fleming's. This is near Her Ridge. I just threw it in there. Let's get to the next one. And this one's William Wireman. And if you look at it, this is for like 800 acres along Bermudian Creek. And look at the date, Andrew.
1749.
1749. And guess what we have in our collection? Let's go to the next one. We have the original 1750 deed for William Wireman.
Wow.
So a year later, and we have it right back here, but you can see it on the screen, and it is just fabulous. I think for an original deed, not a copy of a deed, it might be the earliest thing that we have.
Right.
We have and you might see it there at the bottom, it says 1750.
Right.
Also, I just found this in the Pennsylvania Gazette. In 1752, William Wireman is advertising in the newspaper, which I believe is printed in Philadelphia, for a runaway indentured servant.
Yeah. It doesn't appear to be a slave. It looks like it is an indentured servant. Of course, there were both at the time. We had some families owned slaves, some owned indentured servants.
And here's a 1762 deed in our collection that we have. And let's go to the next one. 1769 deed. Now, John Penn had died in 1746. So this starts off, it's a printed deed for Thomas and Richard Penn. And so again, when I talk to people who live in this area, the earliest deeds that we have in our area are signed by agents for the Penn children. Now, of course, due to the vague nature of William Penn's original charter in 1781, the boundary between the colonies of Maryland and Pennsylvania and where that boundary between the two was in dispute for almost a century. After several failed attempts to resolve the issue, a temporary line was established in 1739. Maryland authorities, however, persisted in the claim for a boundary farther north, and this led to great confusion and violence. The MasonDixon Line was surveyed by Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon in 1765, but it was not officially agreed upon until 1774. Of interest to me is the fact that the MasonDixon Line as it sits today is only a few hundred yards different than the 1769 line that was laid at that time, 25 years earlier.
Right.
And that was a sketch of
Jeremiah Dixon.
Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon.
Right.
Now, this is actually from the state of Maryland. They have the original line survey, and this is the part that is in our county. And of course, you might note that they put markers every mile and a crown stone every 5 miles. On this particular map, off to the right, you might see the road leading to Hanover, Pennsylvania. And then you can see, I think,
Marsh Creek.
Yeah, Marsh Creek, Willoway Creek, which is Alloway Creek, but on the early map, it's Willoway Creek, and Middle Creek, which is Tom's Creek, also on this map, and then the South Mountain Range. So that's Adams County on Mason-Dixon's original survey. Now, we have 25 Mason-Dixon markers along the line in our county, abutting Carroll County, Maryland, and of course, Frederick County. And this is one near present-day Zora, not far from the Emmitsburg Road. And Andrew really likes this particular marker. He got another photograph of this marker, and using our modern technology, he colorized it.
Right.
That is the crown stone that shows the Maryland side of the line looking into Pennsylvania.
That's the Calvert family crest, right?
The Calvert,
and of
yeah.
course, the Penn family crest of Pennsylvania is on the reverse side. Amazing. They must have. Can you talk a little bit, Tim, about how they got these markers and how they must have?
They came from England.
Right. Right.
They weigh about 800 pounds each.
Right, and they created them the
thing that amazes me about it is not the fact that they brought these markers over from England into the area of Philadelphia, but if they weigh 800 pounds, how many can you possibly get in a wagon? And do you send the wagon back and the wagon gets the markers and then the wagon brings some markers out and drops them off and then goes back and to Philadelphia to get more markers? And the farther you go out, the farther Philadelphia is away.
Right. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah. And the Mason-Dixon line went down the side of Delaware as well, too. I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Now, for our new museum, I really want a Mason-Dixon marker on display. And this is your county. In your county, there was a missing Mason-Dixon marker. We have a missing one, too, on our line between Adams and Carroll County. But there was a missing one. And they actually had one manufactured and placed back on the site. And this was a crown stone. Our missing one is not a crown stone.
Right. If you want to fulfill Tim's dream to have that marker, you can donate.
That's right. That's right. We're going to have a marker in the museum.
There's some markers for the Mason-Dixon line.
Okay.
And we're only Gettysburg, by the way, only 8 miles from the Mason-Dixon line.
So now, of course, we have these different land grants that we were just talking about. And let's go to the next one. Carroll's Delight. So Charles Carroll of Maryland, not the signer of the Declaration, but another Charles Carroll, he actually had 2 land grants in Maryland and Pennsylvania on the northern border, Carrollsburg and Carroll's Delight. In 1720, oh, that's not the right one. Where did I put that? I probably switched them up.
I would fill in here, but this is Tim's specialty.
I lost that page. How can I possibly have?
It's a beautiful view, though. Is that the South Mountain Range in the background there? Yeah.
So during the 1730s, Maryland officials created Carroll's Delight, Carrollsburg, and Big Choice. And 1732, Carroll's Delight was 5,000 acres of land, or Carroll's Tract, as it's come to be known. And the tract was resurveyed in the 1790s by William Mclean. Let's go to the next one. And we actually have the 1790s resurveyed. So we don't have the original survey of it, but this is a fabulous document, a pretty large document in our collection. And if we go to the next one, there was some kind of boundary dispute on the very northwestern corner of Carroll's Delight, near where William McLean lived, and with some of his neighbors. And you can see all this detail there about the problems of the controversy. So they resurveyed Carroll's Delight in the 1790s, and it's just a fabulous document. Now I want to talk about Diggs' choice. And
This is Tim's favorite topic, by the way.
how to start talking about Diggs' choice. So in 1727, Maryland officials issued property to John Diggs along the northern frontier. John Diggs' grandfather had been the governor of Virginia.
Right. And the northern frontier, by the way, is very vague.
It's
We're
very
talking about
vague.
Maryland officials saying you can settle and have land on the northern frontier.
And they said that he had a warrant for 10,000 acres. That was 1727. So according to one survey, I think it's 1732, this guy said that Diggs is claiming all the land from the branches of the Monocacy River, which I take it as referring to Marsh Creek and Rock Creek, to all the creeks on the branches on the Susquehanna River, which is well New York County. And that's well more than 10,000 acres.
Right.
In 1732, they surveyed the land and they came up with this area that's shown on Neil Hively's land ownership map in pink. That's the crazy survey that he ends up with. It's 6,822 acres. And again, you can only get land that's unoccupied and not claimed by other people. And so you can't just like run your lines across somebody else's property. Now, in 1739, Pennsylvania and Maryland came to a temporary line agreement. And that temporary line is well south of John Diggs' land. But as part of the agreement, Pennsylvania acknowledged the right of Marylanders that had already been granted land in Pennsylvania. So Charles Carroll and John Diggs, they got to keep their land and not reapply for a warrant from the state of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And I think that was very nice of the Pennsylvania officials.
Yes.
But that wasn't enough for John Diggs. He was really upset because he said that he was supposed to have 10,000 acres in his warrant and he only got 6,800. So he got another surveyor from Maryland to come up and resurvey his land. Let's get to the next thing. I found this in the Pennsylvania archives. And I'm sure Dr. Gladfelter and Arthur Weiner, who were both authorities on this subject, knew about this, but this was new to me. Where Zachariah Butcher, a deputy surveyor in Pennsylvania, is actually saying that he was out doing Adam Forney's, surveying Adam Forney's land in 1741, 2 years after the agreement. And he says, John Diggs' son and Robert Owings, who's a good friend of Diggs, come over to him and asked him what he was doing. And they told him they owned a large piece of land around them. And this is the first evidence where people are asking Diggs, can we see your survey? We'd really like to know where your land is. And they refuse to show their survey because they claim everything in that area as their land. Now that's 1741. So in 1745, Diggs has an illegal survey done. Can we go back to? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
No problem.
And if we go back to, you see the green. The green around the pink is the area that he extended his land. He crossed 14 different warrants and surveys done by the state of Pennsylvania when he resurveyed the land. It was an illegal survey. It was not, approved by the state of Pennsylvania. And as part of the 1739 agreement, he can't do that. But he had Maryland officials put their stamp on it.
And Dudley Diggs is English, is that correct?
Yes, and they're Pennsylvania German.
Yes, so we're talking about early German and Scots-Irish settlers who are not that
I'd say in this area, probably early Irish
right.
and Germans fighting. So it's Germans and Irish fighting with English mixed
And we
in.
have one of those here.
So After that, Diggs starts going around to these Pennsylvanians who got their land through the Pennsylvania Land Office legally and telling them that they're on his land. He actually has a couple of them in when is it? 1746. He actually has a person impersonate a sheriff from Maryland and arrest two of them and try to take them back to Maryland and have them pay for the land that he says is his. But some other locals get together, they track down the party, they beat up Diggs and his men, and they take the settlers back. But there is bad feelings because of this. Let me just read you this. Adam Forney, whose son is one of the ones Diggs tried to kidnap and throw in jail, he said this this is 1746, in a letter he wrote to the officials of Pennsylvania. If this matter is not rectified, Diggs trying to take other people's land, we must help ourselves, and should it be with our last drop of blood, for I am well assured that we will not be put under by no Diggs that ever lived under the sun. Pretty harsh words.
People did have personalities back then.
So in 1752, John Diggs has someone impersonate a sheriff from Maryland. And he and this supposed sheriff,
this is the second
and
time
his son,
right?
This is a different time.
Yep.
Goes to the mill of Martin Kitzmiller, Kitzmiller's mill, and says he's going to arrest him because he's on his land, or he's going to evict him from his land. Clearly, looking back at it, Martin Kitzmiller got his land legally through the Pennsylvania Land Office, and Diggs has no reason to be doing this. Martin Kitzmiller's son comes out of the house with a gun. There's a scuffle, and the gun accidentally discharges and kills Dudley Diggs, John Diggs' son. Immediately, Martin Kitzmiller and his son hand themselves over to the York County Sheriff. There's a trial in the state of Pennsylvania, and it's found accidental homicide that the gun accidentally discharged.
Right. This is one of the earliest murders, though, in this part of Pennsylvania.
And it made the newspaper.
Yeah.
And you can see, I think there's an article in the newspaper.
Kitzmiller and Jacob Kitzmiller were indicted for the murder of Dudley Diggs and tried for the same. The jury acquitted Martin and found Jacob guilty only of homicide in his own defense. There you go. Early example of castle doctrine, right?
Yeah. So this is in 1752. Diggs, he still, for a while claims that this is his land and people need to pay him. I feel bad for the people who did pay him and then had to repay because it wasn't his land, it's Pennsylvania's land. So he dies in 1760. Let's go to the next one. And this is part of his estate. And this is his heirs of his estate. And they are trying to sell the land in Diggs' choice, which at that time had not been sold yet. And Andrew, can you read where it says the land is?
Let's see.
Diggs' choice.
Oh, here you go. This is what I know you like this. The land lying in Frederick County, Maryland, being part of the estate of Mr. John Diggs, deceased.
Frederick County.
Yep.
He would never admit it. Let's go to the next one. I've only ever found one deed to Diggs' choice. And I think that, Carroll's, if you go to Carrollsburg or Carroll's Delight, Frederick County Courthouse is filled with deeds that Carroll was given to the people who bought his land. But Diggs doesn't seem to like to file deeds or give deeds to his land because I don't think he wants people to know exactly where it is. But here's a deed from John Diggs to, is it Will?
Michael Will.
Michael Will. And it says that the piece of land is in Baltimore County, Maryland. Wow. You see that? And it's filed in the Baltimore County courthouse.
That's amazing.
Now, because of all this, for years and years and years, there are problems with the boundaries of land. And here's document in our collection, and it's the plan of a dispute of part of the land in Diggs' choice. So not only do the people who live near the boundary of Diggs' choice not know where their land is because he crossed into their land on his surveys, but within Diggs' choice, when he sells all properties, he doesn't necessarily give the person a deed or a survey to their land. So the people who live in Diggs' choice are fighting with each other as to where the boundaries of their land are. Let's go to the next one. And here is a document that's fascinating. And I don't know if you can see on it where all the lines are crossing each other. And if we go to the next one, there's this house there, Adam Staub. Do you see how one of the lines goes through the middle of his yard? Adam Staub is murdered by one of his neighbors, I believe in 1773, over a squabble over where the boundaries of his land were.
Wow.
So this isn't violence against the Diggs, it's violence because these people bought land from Diggs and don't know where the boundaries are.
I can imagine how chaotic that must have been.
And then here's another land dispute. And I don't know if you can see all the lines on here. I have a headache looking at this survey and trying to figure out what it's trying to show me and whose land is crossing whose land. And on this one, it's kind of interesting because I know exactly where this land is because there's two landmarks on here that we can see very well. So let's go to the next one. Now this, I made it north-south. In the middle of it is where Diggs' original plantation house would be. And this would be on Chapel Road between Centennial Road and the Basilica along the creek. So the creek is to the left. And that is right along that road somewhere. And at the very top, I think you see at the very top, it says church.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the Basilica.
Right. There's nothing left of this property, right, of the Diggs?
Not that I know of.
Right.
But we got an idea of where his house was. In 1774, William McLean is hired as a surveyor, and he is sent into Diggs' choice. And there's a lot of people don't like him. They suspect that the Diggs have sent him, but he's in there to resurvey everybody's piece of land and try to figure out where the boundaries are. And we here at the Adams County Historical Society have his original survey book with his notes of the resurvey of Diggs' choice.
Wow.
Fascinating.
That is
stuff.
amazing. It's an amazing story. Good.
Okay, and then one
Our
last thing.
story.
The manner of mass.
This is our favorite story, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe not yours.
Okay.
I think you like the Dudley Diggs.
So throughout the years of Pennsylvania, the Penn family set aside thousands of acres of land into what was known as manors, land set aside for their own personal use and profit. In 1741, Thomas Penn directed surveyors to map, quote, a tract of land on the branches of Marsh Creek containing about 30,000 acres. However, that land was already occupied by some 150 Scotch-Irish settlers who were preparing to go through the process to gain ownership to that land.
And had no idea until surveyors showed up to tell them.
If the manor was laid out, they would not be able to get their lands through the regular process of land ownership. They would have to negotiate.
Right, and they had been told they could settle any of this land.
And they had been told they could settle there.
Right.
So they became very violent. Let's go back one.
Oh.
This is finally when the manor of Mass is surveyed in 1765. That's the survey for the land.
And Gettysburg is in the center of
this. And Gettysburg's in the center.
Or what would become Gettysburg in 1786.
Now, this is the actual 1741, or the next one, a copy of the 1741 document that phrases how they're going to get their 30,000 acres of land. Let's go to the next one. Now, here is a letter by the surveyor, and this that quote I read you about the survey is June 18th, and this is June 17th, 1741. And basically, he says in the letter that he goes to try to survey the land, and a group of settlers assemble around him and threaten him and tell him to get off of the property, to get out of their land.
We love that. We love the quotes. For they gather together in companies and go in arms every time they expect I am anywhere near or about them, with full resolution to kill or cripple me or any other person who shall attempt to lay out a manner.
So then the next one. So,
and again, they probably don't even speak English very well or at all. So it's probably very
well, the Scotch Irish. Yeah. But, here is a list of the people who obstructed the survey. And it says this is made in 1743, but we believe it's all from the same event. And in this document, they have the names of the people who obstructed the survey, the guys who actually physically obstructed it. And one of them has a note beside him. Would you like to read it?
One of my favorite quotes. It's Thomas Hooswick. I guess probably never stayed here because that's not a local name. A lot of these people, again, moved on to other places. They're not they didn't stay here for decades like many of the families you know. But it says that he declares to the surveyor, if ye chain be spread again, he would stop it. And then he took ye compass from ye surveyor general. An amazing, note about this guy taking and like smashing the equipment of the surveyor.
So the Penn family, the Quaker-controlled, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania doesn't really know what to do about this.
Right, and this becomes known as the Marsh Creek Resistance.
The Marsh Creek Resistance.
Right.
And it goes on for years. From 1741, they don't come to any kind of agreement until 1765, when the agreement is made that the people who lived here in 1741 can use that and they can apply for the land under the regular Pennsylvania Land Act. But if people come in afterwards, then they have to buy it through the Penn family.
Right.
And in 1765, they created a list of people who lived on the lands in 1765
right.
that occupied land that had been occupied in 1741. So the names are the 1765 names,
right.
But it gives the date
of
the settlement. Now that date of settlement could be the owner before them or two owners before them, but it gives the date of settlement of that piece of property,
right?
And a little bit about it.
Right.
We have trouble figuring out who the early residents of this area are. We do have a 1762 tax list for York County, but here's a newspaper notice from Annapolis, Maryland, and it's 1745. And it's mentioning here that there is a runaway, again, a indentured servant, most likely, that they're looking for. And he's gone to a place called Marsh Creek in Pennsylvania.
Wow, that is amazing.
And then one more. And here is from, I didn't put the date, did I? Oh, yeah, 1769. And again, Baltimore town, and it is an escaped slave.
Wow.
This time it's clear.
Wow.
And this
from Hugh Scott of York County.
Yeah.
Amazing. Which would be Adams County.
And Hugh Scott and the Scott family are early settlers. So we can find references to the early settlers here in documents, but we don't have a complete list of the early settlers. From the 1730s until the 1760s, when they finally resolved the dispute over the manor of Mass, obviously the people here aren't going to keep many records as to who the people are living here. And there's no land documents such as we have in other places.
Right.
But that's just a little bit about the turmoil of the early settlers. Now, right after this, of course, this early period of settlement, we have the French and Indian War.
Right.
And we did a program a couple months back on the French and Indian War.
And that's on our YouTube channel. We should note all of these programs that we do every week, they go onto our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you miss them, you can check it out there. I think it's called the French and Indian War or something to that effect. This is just a sample of one of the many topics that we have here that interest us at the Adams County Historical Society. And of course, Gettysburg is so famous for the battle, but there's so much history before and after. And we're very excited to be building a new facility to shine a light on our county's entire history, the story of Gettysburg and the story of all the wonderful people who've lived here and have created all these incredible records and documents and photographs and other items that we preserve here at the Adams County Historical Society. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if you enjoyed the program, again, there is a $500 match tonight. So if you like the program and you want to support our new building and our efforts to preserve and continue to do these programs, I hope you'll hit the donate button on this post or donate at our website. It's achs-pa.org. Again, I'm Andrew Dalton. This is Tim Smith. And thanks again for joining us for our weekly program series. We'll see you next week. Have a good night.